my giant pants. Back for another instalment of The Adventures of Captain Underpants by Dav Pilkey. Now, can you remember what had happened in the last session? The boys had got into big trouble, didn't they? But they did find a way of getting out of trouble by using a special ring to hypnotise Mr. Krupp. So, I wonder what they're going to use the ring to do next. If I had a magic ring, I think I would hypnotise people to buy me lots and lots of presents. And then I'd have loads of presents to open. Maybe you can have a think about what you do. So let's see what's going to happen next. Chapter 11, Fun with Hypnosis. When Harold bent down to close the filing cabinet, he took a quick look inside. "Whoa!" he cried. "Look at all the stuff in here." The filing cabinet was filled with everything Mr. Krupp had taken away from the boys over the years. There were slingshots, whoopee cushions, skateboards, fake doggy doo-doo, you name it, it was in there. "Look at this!" cried George. "A big stack of Captain Underpants comics. He's got every issue." For hours, the two boys sat on the floor, laughing and reading their comics. Finally, George looked at the clock. "Yikes!" he said. "It's almost lunchtime. We better clean up this mess and get to class." The boys looked up at their principal, who had been standing behind them in a trance all morning. "Gee, I almost forgot about Mr. Krupp," said Harold. "What should we do with him?" "Do you want to have some fun?" asked George. "Why not?" said Harold. "I haven't had any fun in the last 4 to 6 weeks. Remember, that's how long it took to get the ring. "Cool," said George. He walked up to Mr. Krupp and snapped his fingers. Snap. "You are a chicken," he said. Suddenly, Mr. Krupp leaped onto his desk and flapped his arms. "Clock, clock, clock! Clock, clock, clock!" he cried, kicking his papers off the desk behind him and pecking at his pen and pencil set. George and Harold howled with laughter. Let me try, said Harold. You are a monkey." "You've got to snap your fingers," said George. "Oh yeah," said Harold. "Snap! You are a monkey." Suddenly, Mr. Krupp sprang off his desk and began swimming from the fluorescent light fixtures. "Ooh, ooh, 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 ooh," he shrieked, leaping from one side of the room to the other. George and Harold laughed so hard they almost cried. He looks a bit like a monkey, doesn't he? Reminds me of a gorilla. My turn, said George. "Let's see, what should we turn him into next?" "I know," Harold said, holding up a Captain Underpants comic. "Let's turn him into Captain Underpants." "Good idea," said George. "Snap! You are the greatest superhero of all time, the amazing Captain Underpants." Mr. Krupp tore down from the red curtain from his office window and tied it around his neck. Then he took off his shoes, socks, shirt, trousers, and his awful toupee. Toupee is like a wig that you wear on your head. And you can see I've got a little visitor down here who also wants to join in the story. Marvin, it's not very helpful. Come here. Sorry about that interruption, guys. "Tra-la-la," he sang. Mr. Krupp stood before them, looking quite triumphant, with his cape blowing in the breeze of the open window. George and Harold were dumbfounded. "You know," said George, "he kind of looks like Captain Underpants." "Yeah," Harold replied. After a short silence, the two boys looked at each other and burst into laughter. George and Harold had never laughed so hard in all their lives. Tears ran down their faces as they rolled about on the floor, shrieking hysterically. After a while, George pulled himself up from the floor for another look. "Hey!" George cried. "Where'd he go?" Chapter 12. Out of the window. George and Harold dashed to the window and looked out. There, running across the car park, was a pudgy old guy in his underwear with a red cape flowing behind him. There he is going, tra-la-la! "Mr. Crop, come back!" shouted Harold. "He won't answer to that," said George. "He thinks he's Captain Underpants now." "Oh no," said Harold. "He's probably running off to fight crime." "Oh no," said George. "And we've got to stop him," said George. "Oh no," cried Harold. "No way." "Look," said George. "He could get killed out there." Harold was unmoved. "Or worse," said George. "We could get into big trouble." "You're right," said Harold. "We've got to go after him." The two boys opened the bottom cabinet drawer and took out their slingshots and skateboards. "Do you think we should bring anything else?" asked Harold. "Yes," said George. "Let's bring the fake doggy-doo." "Good thinking," said Harold. "You just never know when fake doggy-doo is going to come in handy." Ugh. Gross. Harold stuffed Mr. Crupp's clothes, shoes and toupee into his backpack. Then together the two boys leapt out of the window, slid down the flagpole and took off on their skateboards after the amazing Captain Underpants. Chapter 13. Bank Robbers. George and Harold rode their skateboards all over town looking for Captain Underpants. "I can't find him anywhere," said Harold. "You'd think a guy like him would be easy to spot," said George. Then the boys turned a corner and there was Captain Underpants. Captain Underpants was standing in front of a bank, looking quite heroic. "Mr. Crop!" cried Harold. "Shh!" said George. "Don't call him that. Call him Captain Underpants." "Oh, yeah," said Harold. "And don't forget to snap your fingers," said George. "Right," said Harold. But before he got a chance, the bank doors flew wide open and out stepped two robbers. The robbers took one look at Captain Underpants and stopped dead in their tracks. "Surrender," said Captain Underpants, "or I will have to resort to my wedgie power." "Oh no," whispered Harold and George. Nobody moved for about 10 seconds. Finally, the robbers looked at each other and burst out laughing. They dropped their loot and fell to the pavement, screaming in hysterics. Almost immediately, the cops arrived and arrested the crooks. "Let that be a lesson to you," cried Captain Underpants. "Never underestimate the power of underwear." The police chief, looking quite angry, marched over to Captain Underpants. "And just who the heck do you think you're supposed to be?" the police chief demanded. "Why, I'm Captain Underpants, the world's greatest superhero," said Captain Underpants. "I fight for truth, justice, and all that is pre-shrunk and cottony." "Oh, yeah?" shouted the police chief. "Cuff him, boys!" One of the cops took out his handcuffs and grabbed Captain Underpants by the arm. Uh-oh. "Uh-oh," cried George. "We gotta roll!" Together, the two boys zoomed into the crowd, weaving in and out of the cops and bystanders. Harold skated up to Captain Underpants and knocked the superhero off his feet. George caught him, and the boys skated away with Captain Underpants on their shoulders. "Stop!" cried the cops, but it was too late. George, Harold and Captain Underpants were gone. Chapter 14, The Big Bang. After their quick escape, George, Harold and Captain Underpants stopped at a deserted street corner to catch their breath. "Okay," said George, "let's dehypnotise him quick before something else kaboom happens." A huge explosion came from the rare crystal shop across the street. Heavy smoke poured out of the building. Suddenly, two robots, one with stolen crystals, emerged from the smoke and jumped into an old van. "Did I just see two robots get into a van?" asked Harold. "You know," said George, "up until now, this story was almost believable." "Well, believable or not," said Harold, "we're not getting involved. I repeat, we are not getting involved." Just then, Captain Underpants leaped from the street corner and dashed in front of the van. "Stop in the name of underwear!" he cried. "Uh-oh," said George, "I think we're involved." The two robots started up the van and swerved around Captain Underpants. Unfortunately, the van brushed up against his red cape and it got caught. With a mighty jerk, Captain Underpants flipped backwards and the van pulled him along as it drove away. "Grab him!" cried George. The two boys skateboarded with all their might towards the speeding van and grabbed Captain Underpants by the ankles. "Help!" they cried as the van pulled them through the city streets. "Mummy," said a little boy sitting on a bench, "I just saw two robots driving a van with a guy in his underwear hanging off the back by a red cape, pulling two boys on skateboards behind him with his feet." "How do you expect me to believe such a ridiculous story?" asked his mother. Finally, the van came to a screeching halt in front of an old, abandoned warehouse. The sudden stop made Captain Underpants flip over the roof of the van and crash through the front door of the building. "Well, well, well," says a strange voice from inside the warehouse. "It looks as if we have a visitor." That is where I'm going to stop. So, who do you think is in charge of the robots in the warehouse? Maybe you could take a guess. It sounds like big trouble that the boys have got themselves into by just not admitting what they've done. They've got themselves into even bigger trouble, haven't they? So, we'll find out what happens next week. Okay, I'll see you all soon. Bye.